screams every time they can't find their house keys, or every time they get stuck in traffic. These unfortunate characters are evincing a curious but reckless faith in a world in which keys never go astray, the roads are mysteriously traffic-free. It is hope that is turbocharging their rage. So if we're to get a little bit less sad and a little less angry about our love lives, we will have to diminish some of our hopes. It's very hard to diminish hope around love because there are vast industries designed to inflate our expectations of love. There was a wonderful quote from the German philosopher Theodor Adorno, who in the 1960s said that the most dangerous man in America was Walt Disney. And the reason for his attack on Walt was because he believed that Walt was the prime agent of hope, and therefore of rage, and therefore of bitterness. And he thought that it was the task of philosophy to let us down gently, which is what I'm going to be doing today. So remember the theme of the talk, why you will marry the wrong person. There are a number of reasons why this is going to happen to you, or has maybe already in the privacy of your heart happened to you. I should say that it's not that bad. And the reason is that all of us will not manage to find the right person, but we will probably all of us manage to find a good enough person. So, and that's success, as you will come to see. One of the reasons why we're not going to be able to pull this one off as successfully as we might have hoped at the outset of probably our teenagehood when we were contemplating love, is that we are very strange. I'm very strange and you're very strange. You don't let on, and we're not going to do anything very dangerous, but we are basically psychologically quite strange. We don't normally know very much about this strangeness. It takes us a long, long time before we're really on top of the way in which we are hard to live with. Does anyone in this room think that they're quite easy to live with, on balance? Yeah? Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't want to be rude, but please come and see me afterwards. I know that you're not easy to live with. And the reason is that you're Homo sapiens, and therefore you are not easy to live with. No one is. But there's a wall of silence that surrounds us from a deeper acquaintance with what is actually so difficult about us. Our friends don't want to tell us, why would they bother? They just want a pleasant evening out. They're not. Our friends know more about us and more about our flaws, probably after a 10-minute acquaintance. A stranger will know more about your flaws than you might learn over 40 years of life on the planet. Our capacity to intuit what is wrong with us is very weak. Our parents don't tell us very much. Why would they? They love us too much. They know. They can see, of course. I mean, they followed us from the crib. They know what's wrong with us. They're not going to tell us because they just want to be sweet. And our ex-lovers, a vital source of knowledge, they know. Absolutely, they know. But do you remember that speech that they gave? It was moving at the time when they said that they wanted a little more space and were attracted to travel and were interested in the culture of Southeast Asia. Nonsense. They thought lots of things were wrong with you, but they weren't going to be bothered to tell you. They were just off out of there. Why would they bother? So this knowledge that is out there is not in you. It's out there, but it's not in you. And so therefore we progress through the world with a very low sense of what is actually wrong with us. Not least, all of us are addicts. Almost all of us are addicts. Not injecting heroin as such, but addicts in the sense we need to redefine what addiction is. I like to define addiction not in terms of the substance you're taking. In other words, I'm a heroin addict, I'm a cocaine addict. No. Addiction is basically any pattern of behavior whereby you cannot stand to be with yourself and certain of the more uncomfortable thoughts and, more importantly, emotions that come from being on your own. And so therefore you can be addicted to almost anything so long as it keeps you away from yourself, so long as it keeps you away from tricky self-knowledge. And most of us are addicts. And thanks to all sorts of technologies and distractions, etc., we can have a good life where we will almost certainly be guaranteed not to spend any time with ourselves, except maybe for certain kind of airlines that still don't have the gadgets to distract us. But otherwise, you can be guaranteed you don't have to talk to yourself. And this is a disaster for your capacity to have a relationship with another person, because until you know yourself, you can't properly relate to another person. One of the reasons why love is so tricky for us is that it requires us to do something we really don't want to do, which is to approach another human being and say, I need you. I wouldn't really survive without you. I am vulnerable before you. And there's a very strong impulse in all of us to be strong and to be well defended and not to reveal our vulnerability to another person. Psychologists talk of two patterns of response that tend to crop up in people whenever there's a danger of needing to be extremely vulnerable, dangerously vulnerable and exposed to another person. The first response is to get what psychologists call anxiously attached. Attachment theory, some of you may know. So when you are anxiously attached to somebody, rather than saying, I need you, I depend on you, you start to get very procedural. You say, you're 10 minutes late, or I think the bin bags need to be taken out, or you start to get strict when actually what you want to do is to ask a very poignant question, do you still care about me? But we don't dare to ask that question, so instead we get nasty, we get stiff, we get procedural. The other pattern of behavior which psychologists have identified, and it tends to apply to people who are in this room, in other words, A-types, very outgoing types, strivers, you become, in relationships, tell me if I'm wrong, you become what is known as avoidant, which means that when you need someone, it's precisely at that moment that you pretend you don't. When you feel most vulnerable, you say, I'm quite busy at the moment, no, I'm fine, thanks, I'm well busy today. In other words, you don't reveal the need for another person, which sets them off into a chain of wondering whether you are to be trusted, and there's then a cycle of low trust. So we get into these patterns of not daring to do the thing that we really need to do, which is to say, even though I'm a grown person, maybe I've got a beard, maybe I've been alive for a long time, I'm 6'2", etc., I'm actually a small child inside, and I need you like a small child would need its parent. This is so humbling that most of us refuse to make that step, and therefore refuse the challenge of love. In short, we don't know very much how to love. And it sounds very odd, because imagine if somebody said to you, look, all of us probably in this room would probably need to go to a school of love. We think, what, a school of love? Love is just an instinct. No, it's not. It's a skill, and it's a skill that needs to be learned, and it's a skill that our society refuses to consider as a skill. We are meant to always just follow our feelings. If you keep following your feelings, you will almost certainly make a big mistake in your life. What is love? Ultimately, love, I believe, is something, first of all, there's a distinction between loving and being loved. We all start off in life by knowing a lot about being loved. Being loved is the fun bit. That's when somebody brings you something on a tray and asks you how your day at school went, etc. And we grow up thinking that that is what's going to happen in an adult relationship. We can be forgiven for that. It's an understandable mistake, but it's a very tragic mistake, and it leads us not to pay attention to the other side of the equation, which is to love. And what does it really mean to love? To love, ultimately, is to have the willingness to interpret someone's, on the surface, not very appealing behavior in order to find
Similar protection for students, because students shouldn't go out into life without an ability to communicate. And that's because your success in life will be determined largely by your ability to speak, your ability to write, and the quality of your ideas in that order. I know that I can be successful in this because the quality of communication your speaking, your writing, is largely determined by this formula. It's a matter of how much knowledge you have, how much you practice with that knowledge, and your inherent talent. And notice that the T is very small. What really matters is what you know. This point came to me suddenly a few decades ago when I was skiing at Sun Valley. I had heard that it was Celebrity Weekend, and one of the celebrities was Mary Lou Retton, famous Olympic gymnast, perfect tens in the vault. And I heard that she was a novice at skiing, so when the opportune moment arrived, I looked over on the novice slope and saw this young woman who, when she became unbalanced, went like that. And I said, that's got to be her. That must be the gymnast. But then it occurred to me, I'm a much better skier than she is, and she's an Olympic athlete, not only an ordinary Olympic athlete, an outstanding one. And I was a better skier because I had the K, and I had the P, and all she had was the T. So you can get a lot better than people who may have inherent talents if you have the right amount of knowledge. So that's what my objective is today, and here's my promise. Today you will see some examples of what you can put in your armamentarium of speaking techniques. And it will be the case that some one of those examples, some heuristic, some technique, maybe only one, will be the one that gets you the job. And so this is a very nonlinear process. You never know when it's going to happen. But that is my promise. By the end of the next 60 minutes, you'll have been exposed to a lot of ideas, some of which you'll incorporate into your own repertoire, and they will ensure that you get the maximum opportunity to have your ideas valued and accepted by the people you speak with. Now, in order to do that, we have to have a rule of engagement, and that is no laptops, no cell phones. So if you could close those, I'll start up as soon as you're done. Some people ask why that is a rule of engagement. And the answer is, we humans only have one language processor. And if your language processor is engaged, could you shut the laptop, please? If your language processor is engaged, browsing the web or reading your email, you're distracted. And worse yet, you distract all of the people around you. Studies have shown that. And worse yet, if I see an open laptop somewhere back there or up here, it drives me nuts. And I do a worse job. And so that ensures that all of your friends who are paying attention don't get the performance that they came to have. So that's it for preamble. Let's get started. First thing to talk about, of course, is how to start. Some people think the right thing to do is to start a talk with a joke. I don't recommend it. And the reason is that in the beginning of a talk, people are still putting their laptops away. They're becoming adjusted to your speaking parameters, to your vocal parameters. And they're not ready for a joke. So it doesn't work very well. They usually fall flat. What you want to do instead is start with an empowerment promise. You want to tell people what they're going to know at the end of the hour that they didn't know at the beginning of the hour. It's an empowerment promise. It's the reason for being here. What would be an example? Oh, I see. At the end of this 60 minutes, you will know things about speaking you don't know now, and something among those things you know will make a difference in your life. Yeah, that's an empowerment promise. So that's the best way to start. So now that I've talked a little bit about how to start, what I want to do is give you some samples of heuristics that are always on my mind when I give a talk. And the first of these heuristics is that it's a good idea to cycle on the subject. go around it again, go around it again. Some people say, tell them what you want to tell them again, and then tell them a third time, as if people weren't intelligent. But the point is, the reason is, well, there are many reasons, one of which is at any given moment, about 20% of you will be fogged out no matter what the lecture is. So if you want to ensure that the probability that everybody gets it is high, you need to say it 3 times. So cycling is one of the things that I always think about when I give a talk. Another thing I think about is, in explaining my idea, I want to build a fence around it. So that it's not confused with somebody else's idea. So if you were from Mars, and I was teaching you about what an arch is, I might say to you, well, that's an arch. And that's not to be confused with some other things that other people might think is an arch. This is not an arch. That's not an arch. I'm building a fence around my idea so that it can be distinguished from somebody else's idea. So in a more technical sense, I might say, well, my algorithm might seem similar to Jones's algorithm, except his is exponential and mine's linear. That's putting a fence around your idea so that people can not be confused about how it might relate to something else. The third thing on this list of samples is the idea of verbal punctuation. And the idea here is that because people will occasionally fog out and need to get